From the moment I bought the small, sun-drenched parcel on the outskirts of the subdivision, I knew it wasn't going to be ordinary. Nestled between perfectly manicured lawns and cookie-cutter houses, my land was a patch of freedom the HOA seemed to have forgotten. It wasn't large, maybe just under an acre, but it had something that no nearby property could boast. A view of the rolling hills in the distance, and a dirt path that led from the street directly onto my property. For months I observed the slow parade of HOA inspectors, their clipboards out, checking on the tiniest deviations from the neighborhood rules. I never thought I'd become part of that world, but the quiet thrill of owning land that was mine, truly mine, whispered possibilities I couldn't ignore. The first plan I drew up was simple: a road. Not a fancy one, nothing paved or flashy, just a solid, reliable path to connect my small house to the main street. The idea was practicality, a way to make daily life easier. I wanted trucks to be able to pull up for deliveries, and I wanted a proper driveway that wouldn't turn to mud every time it rained. I spent nights sketching the route, measuring distances with old surveying tools, imagining a smooth dirt road snaking gracefully past my oak trees. In my mind, it was a project that respected the land, improved accessibility, and stayed quietly under the radar of the OA. By early spring, I started work. Gravel, sand, and machinery became my companions. The first day, I dug into the soft earth, listening to the crunch of shovels and the rumble of the rented excavator. It was physical work, demanding, but exhilarating in a way that home improvement TV shows rarely capture. No one from the HOA came by at first, which made me feel like maybe I had found a loophole, an invisible bubble of autonomy within their meticulously curated world. The road took shape slowly, each layer of gravel and dirt a small victory, a tactile reminder that this land was mine and I could shape it as I saw fit. Then, on the third week of construction, the letters started. The first envelope arrived in mid-morning, crisp and official looking, the HOA logo stamped in the corner. I held it in my hands for a moment, the kind of hesitation that comes when you know trouble has arrived but aren't sure why. Inside was a letter, carefully worded, claiming that the construction of a road on my property violated neighborhood regulations. They mentioned permits I didn't know I needed and fines that could quickly accumulate. At first, I laughed. A $300 fee for building a simple road seemed absurd. But as I read the letter again, the tone shifted from administrative to thinly veiled threat. Over the next few days, more letters came. Each one was a variation on the first, reminders, warnings, and carefully phrased ultimatums. The HOA board seemed intent on proving they had authority over my property, even though the land technically fell within my deed's boundaries. I began to realize that what they wanted was control, not compliance. Their letters spoke of community standards and access rights, but it became clear that the real issue was that someone had dared to act independently in a neighborhood where conformity was law. Despite the letters, I continued working. Gravel trucks arrived, compactors rumbled, and the road slowly took on the shape I had envisioned. Each day, I noticed the subtle changes in the neighborhood's response. Lawn sprinklers paused as neighbors watched from their windows. Cars slowed when passing my property, and whispers followed me along the street. The road was more than gravel and dirt. It was a statement. And then came the first visit. 2 HOA representatives, clipboards in hand, appeared at the edge of my property. They didn't speak at first. They just looked, measuring, calculating, judging. Their silence carried a message heavier than any letter could convey. They were here to assert authority, and they expected me to back down. The confrontation was imminent. The morning the HOA representatives arrived, I felt a strange mix of defiance and curiosity. They stood at the edge of the road I had built, eyes scanning every inch as if they could read the gravel like a contract. Clipboards in hand, they meticulously noted every deviation from community standards, though nothing in my work violated any law or safety code. Their presence was intimidating, a silent attempt to make me question my right to act on my own land. I kept working. Each swing of the shovel, each layer of compacted gravel, became an act of quiet rebellion. I could feel their frustration building with every passing day. Notices piled up in my mailbox, warnings about fines, demands to halt construction, and reminders that the HOA controlled access to the neighborhood roads. The letters were precise, almost ritualistic, each one crafted to make me doubt my judgment. But my determination only grew. The road was more than a practical necessity, it was a symbol of autonomy. Neighbors began to notice the tension. Some watched from behind curtains, whispering about the audacity of someone challenging the AOA's authority. Others seemed to side with me, quietly offering support in the form of casual waves or approving nods when I passed. It became clear that my road had disrupted more than dirt and gravel. It had disrupted the delicate choreography of neighborhood compliance. Weeks passed and the confrontation escalated. The HOA sent inspectors, contractors, even legal representatives, all to enforce a rule that didn't exist in any binding form on my property. Their frustration was palpable, and yet the more they tried to assert control, the more the road became a statement of independence. For the first time, I realized that authority is only as strong as the people willing to accept it. And here, on my little stretch of land, they were about to discover its limits. The tension had reached a boiling point, and the next move would change everything. A week after the last inspection, another letter arrived. This one was bolder. More confrontational, the HOA claimed I owed $300 for unauthorized road construction and access violations. They attached a detailed invoice, complete with late fees that would accrue daily if I refused to pay. The phrasing suggested inevitability, as though I had no choice but to comply. But the more I read it, the more absurd it seemed. Charging someone for building a road on their own property. It felt like a power play, a test of whether I would fold under bureaucratic pressure. I made my decision immediately. I would not pay. The road was mine, built on land I legally owned, and no fee could erase that fact. I photographed every inch of the construction, documented the materials, and reviewed my property deed. Every record confirmed what I already knew. The HOA had no legal claim over the road or the access it provided. I was prepared, not just to defend my right to build, but to assert that the neighborhood's rules had limits. Their response was predictable. Notices escalated from polite reminders to stern warnings, hinting at possible legal action. At the same time, I noticed subtle changes in access. The HOA had previously tried to monitor entry to my property, controlling gates and paths, but the road I built bypassed every checkpoint. Trucks, delivery drivers, and even neighbors began using it freely, without obstruction. My little road had not only created convenience, it had undermined the HOA's control. The dynamic shifted. They still sent letters, still tried to assert authority, but the practical reality was undeniable. I controlled the road in and out. No fee, no warning, no inspector could stop it. The 300 threat, once intimidating, now seemed like an empty echo of their lost influence. For the first time, the balance of power felt tangible, and it was in my favor. And yet, I knew this wasn't the end. There were still battles ahead, more eyes watching, and more rules waiting to be tested. By late spring, the subtle shifts in the neighborhood became impossible to ignore. The HOA, once confident in their ability to control every driveway, gate, and path, was now struggling. The road I had built gave unrestricted access to my property, and suddenly their influence seemed less absolute. Delivery trucks no longer hesitated at checkpoints. Visitors turned down my road without second thought, bypassing the official entrances the HOA tried to enforce. The gravel path was more than a convenience. It had become a symbol of independence that the board couldn't undo. Letters continued to arrive, but their tone had changed. They were less commanding, more defensive, and occasionally uncertain. I could sense the frustration behind every carefully worded line. Their authority relied on compliance, and without compliance, their power eroded. I noticed neighbors whispering more openly now, some subtly supportive, others clearly annoyed by the HOA's flailing attempts at enforcement. The dynamics of the community were changing. What had once been a rigid hierarchy of rules was now flexible, bending under the weight of practicality and common sense. The real turning point came one morning when a board member arrived, standing at the edge of the road with a frustrated glare. They had no legal recourse to block access, no grounds to demand removal of the gravel, and no realistic way to enforce the 300 fee. It was the first time I saw them truly powerless. I realized then that control isn't given. It's taken or surrendered, often in subtle ways that outsiders fail to notice until it's too late. The road, once a simple convenience, had become a line of defense, a reminder that property rights and personal initiative can outweigh bureaucracy. It wasn't about rebellion. It was about establishing a reality the HOA couldn't ignore. And just as quickly as their confidence began to crack, the ripple effects throughout the neighborhood were becoming undeniable. By midsummer, the battle had quietly ended, though no one officially declared a victory. The HOA, once meticulous and unyielding, had lost practical control over access to my property. Their attempts to enforce fees, monitor entrances, and assert authority became increasingly irrelevant. The road I had built was fully functional, used daily by delivery trucks, neighbors, and visitors alike. It had transformed from a simple project into a permanent assertion of autonomy, one they could neither erase nor ignore. Neighbors began to adjust to the new reality. Some continued to watch cautiously from behind curtains, still loyal to HOA rules in principle but aware of the shifting power dynamic. Others embraced it, offering small gestures of support, a nod, a wave, even casual conversations acknowledging the freedom the road provided. What started as a personal project had subtly reshaped the social landscape of the community. People were reminded that practical action often outweighs bureaucratic authority, and that the rules written in binders are only as strong as the willingness of residents to obey them. The letters stopped eventually. The fines, the threats, the warnings, all became background noise, relics of an attempt to assert control over something that was never theirs. In the end, the HOA retained its formal structure, but its influence over my property had effectively ended. I had proven that ownership, initiative, and careful planning could carve out a space immune to empty authority. Walking down the gravel road one evening, feeling the crunch beneath my boots, I realized that this wasn't just about a driveway or a patch of dirt. It was about understanding boundaries, legal, social, and personal, and learning where they could be pushed. The road symbolized more than access, it symbolized independence. And as the sun set over the hills beyond my property, it was clear that some victories don't need confrontation. Sometimes all it takes is laying your own path and letting the world follow.